Information is power.
Ladies and gentlemen, let's do a test here. I want to thank everybody that's in the chat room that's coming through. We have a lot of great people in there. We got George Frazier, TSM Rapper. We got Cool J Shirt. We got the Barbie Girl, Tina, who's in the house. We got Badass Truckin' Babe. Let me say this to Badass Truckin' Babe. You gave me a super chat maybe a week or two back when I was streaming on another issue, maybe the same issue. And I didn't see the super chat that you gave me. I think it was a $10 super chat. So I want to thank you because I don't, I want to show respect to people that support the platform. So let me give you a clap right now. So thank you. We got George Vegan, KDF. Let me see. Carolina Dukes. That's my sister in there. Hustling Man, Perry Taylor. Doug is in the house, one of my old school moderators over here. We got Minx Bricks in the house, and we got my man Max in the house. I'm going to mod brother Max up because me and him have had great conversations together. We have good chemistry. Max, we ought to create a channel, man, with just me and you feeding off of each other, talking about the news events. That's just a thought, Max. I think we got great chemistry in our conversations. But I'm glad that you're over here. Everybody that's come through. We got Sexy Stars in the house. And I want to thank everybody and anybody. We got Sister Murray that's in the house. Money to Burn in the house. Oh, man. We got my man Perspective in the house. Ladies and gentlemen, we have a special guest today. And if you can hear me, if my mic is coming through clear, because that's one of the things I'm always paranoid about is it's the sound coming through. I can see it on my meter bar, but put a 1 in the chat room if you can hear me just fine. But one of the things I want to do here is I want to acknowledge the fact that we do have a very special guest with us, and here it is. So today we've got special guest, the Empowered Esquire TV. You know her as the attorney here on these YouTube streets. She is fantastic. She is incredible. Many people have talked with her, consulted her as it relates to these issues around, obviously, the issues that surround Polite, Michael Norwood. And now we have another individual here that we all know very well. Some of us might have grew up with this man. I did, because I'm a Generation Xer. I remember the Zulu Nation, Afrika Bambaataa. I used to break dance, strut, the whole 9-yard, graffiti art back in the day when I was a youngster coming up as a kid in the late 70s, and then growing into a young teenager in the 80s. So I remember this time, and I remember the artists and Cool, Lurk, and just the whole movement, Grandmaster Flash and the Furious Five, and just everything that was coming out of New York, and particularly coming out of the Bronx at that time. Just fantastic. But unfortunately, there's been allegations made against brother, what can I say, Bam. A lot of people call him Bam for short. There's been allegations about his involvement as it relates to the molestation of young people, adolescents, minors. Let me say that correct, minors. In case we have Randy Savage here. This is a brother who came forth and admitted that he was touched. He's been all over social media over the last few years talking about his encounter with Bam. They called him Bee Stinger, was a nickname that he went by. And he said that Bam had invited him to his apartment up there in the Bronx area. And in a situation like this was this. You also had the Zulu Nation operating out of, according to articles, news reports, okay, allegedly, that he was operating the Zulu Nation as a headquarters right out of his apartment, where Randy Savage said that he had been touched. Of course, we know that Hassan Campbell talked about being touched by Bam as well. These are things that are allegedly, because of the fact that the court has to play this out and dig up the evidence, discovery, the whole 9-yard. And I'm going to ask the attorney that we have here today, what is the truth? Okay. And so he was operating both in a personal way, his own living space in an apartment, plus the Zulu Nation. And now it looks like both, not only Bam, but the Zulu Nation has been brought up under this lawsuit called the Child Victims Act in New York. This was prolonged during the period of time that we were under the COVID very heavily in this country, and they prolonged it to give people opportunity to move the statute of limitations up. Now, I'm going to ask the lawyer, and I'm going to bring her on right now, and get this thing started. I thank everybody for being here again, and let me bring her on right now. We have with me a Mastine lawyer, attorney. She was once a former prosecutor, and we're going to bring her on right now. Ladies and gentlemen, I thank you all for being here, and here she is. The beautiful, the incredible, Empowered Esquire TV. How you doing, my sister? Good to have you here.
Hello.
All right.
Well, I'm happy to be here.
I'm happy that you are here. You can correct anything that I said earlier that was incorrect. But before we get to Bam, because people want to hear this, we know that a lot has been talked about on the YouTube streets about one Michael Norwood. We call him AKA Brother Polite. Can you clean up a few things, because people have been going to their channels? I mean, of course, I went live, and let's clean some things up for not only myself, but everybody. What did the bond hearing represent from a legal aspect? What was going on there, so that we can get the foolishness out of the air?
So from a legal perspective, there was a new information filed. An information is another name for a charging document, which is just a document that states what charges the defendant is being accused of having committed, and what relate to those charges, and it also gives a brief summary of the allegations. So a new information was filed.
Okay.
Based upon that new information, bail/bond had to be addressed again, because when you have new charges, you have to address all these issues again because there are new things to consider.
Okay.
So what we heard in this past hearing was the new charges, and then we heard bail/bond addressed again. The judge actually walks through each charge, and he addresses, or I should say he assigns, a bail amount to each charge. And so the total amount of bail right now in Michael Nowak's case is $46,000.
46. Let me ask you this question, because this is another question that people have been asking. Will he have to pay that in full, or will the courts give him extensions? If that makes any sense.
It does make sense. And that's actually not how it works.
Okay.
So the defendant's option would be to pay it in full or to go through a bail bondsman, right? And that's a separate process where a defendant can go through a bail bondsman and they can pay a certain percentage. Usually, I would say 10%, right? And then the bail bondsman would kind of act as an entity that assures the court that the rest of the amount has been secured. So it's either he can go straight cash bail, is what many people would refer to it as, or he can go through a bail bondsman.
Okay. There were some things there were some allegations brought up by the prosecutor, Nicole Garcia, if I'm saying the prosecutor's name correctly, about the fact that, let me see how I can choose my words properly here, that they believed that there was some harassment by the defendant upon the minor in question. What are your thoughts about that aspect of that, of the bond hearing? And of course, the defense team didn't like that. Of course, they spoke out and said, "Hey, why are we bringing this up now?" What are your thoughts about that before we get into Bambaataa?
Well, my thoughts about that are, I have not really been watching, any content that Michael Nowak has been posting online. So I don't know if he actually said anything threatening towards the alleged victim. But the judge actually said that if those allegations are true, the government should file a motion. And that I agree with. I think if those allegations are true, from doing so by requesting that the judge issue a specific order that addresses social media.
Okay. Let me ask another question, if I could, counselor. What should people on social media, because we talked about this before, that on social media, because he's a public figure, he is open to a certain level of criticism. However, we don't want to make up things on social media that are not true. Can you speak upon that, counselor?
Yes. So, as we have discussed, quite a figure is someone who has chosen to put themselves out to the public, hence them being called a public figure. And so from there on, they make themselves more open to public discussion and public criticism. That is specifically how the law views public figures.
Okay.
So in general, it's already more difficult for a public figure to allege that someone shouldn't be speaking about them, right? Because the general argument is my privacy is being violated. But that's a more difficult argument to make when you put yourself out to the public. You want to be spoken about, right? Now, when it comes to defamation, just as any other citizen would have to prove, a public figure would have to prove that whoever is speaking about them is telling blatant lies, saying things that are false, saying things that they know are false. So from what I've seen people covering cases in which they're reading police reports. I've seen people reading court documents. That is not defamation. Speaking about a public figure using public records is not defamation.
Okay. Thank you for cleaning that up. Not to belabor this point, because we are doing this stream about BAM, but what do you recommend as an attorney that people stay away from when they are broadcasting on these YouTube streets or social media that could probably get them in a pickle? Because Polite or Michael Norwood has said that he's got a team of lawyers and they're watching the videos and that he's going to go after everybody. But however, we heard the prosecution, Nicole Garcia, the attorney, say that they're probably watching him as well on social media, because that's where the judge told him you have a First Amendment right, but you can't step over those bounds. What do you say there, counselor?
So I think it works both ways, just as the judge, right?
Mm-hmm.
So people who are on social media reviewing the case, I would advise that, as I always say, that we take a step back from this case, that we do not become personally invested,
Mm-hmm.
and that when you're reviewing things, you're logical, you're rational, and you're giving your opinion based upon what is available to the public. So I would not advise jumping to conclusions, and I definitely would not advise saying things that you do not know to be true, right?
Mm-hmm.
Now, as far as Michael Nowak and his First Amendment rights, we all have rights, but all of our rights have limitations.
Limitations.
And so limitation to the First Amendment right is the general welfare of the public. And that includes the progression of a criminal case. So a criminal case trumps another person's right to their freedom of speech. So what the judge is pretty much telling Michael Nowak is, in general, you have freedom of speech, but if your speech is interfering with this case,
Mm-hmm.
it's a no-go.
Okay. Well, let me certainly go ahead and say this. Thank you, counselor, for those words. Let's get into the issue of Bambaataa. I'm sure you're familiar with who he is, and you've heard some of the allegations over the last few years. This has been going on for a very, very long time. And recently it came out in the news, all the publications, that not only is Afrika Bambaataa about to be sued, as well as the Zulu Nation are looking at being sued for allegations that there was a 12-year-old minor, let me be careful with my words here, who was, lewd and lascivious acts were going on, and he's also being accused of passing such minor around to other adults. And therefore, they have this law in New York called the Child Victims Act, and I would like you to speak upon that if you can, more in detail as to what exactly is the Child Victims Act in New York. I've had a chance to read it myself, and it looks like this virus that we got going on is really opening up a lot of doors to other things, because it was because of the virus that they extended this law, if I'm not correct. And I believe when they filed this, the deadline was actually this past August. But it looks like it was filed, according to the news and the reports, that it was filed in September the 4th. So I'm trying to figure out how are they able to do that if the deadline was actually in August, and now it looks like that this is all being brought up out of the rug again. That Bambaataa, as well as the Zulu Nation, find themselves involved in a potential lawsuit brought on by the Child Victims Act. Counselor, if you can elaborate further as to what is going on in this situation, let me bring you back in, and here you go.
All righty. So the Child Victims Act extends the statute of limitations for which an alleged victim of abuse, and I don't use the S word because I don't like to mess with people's.
I'm going to stay away from that as well. Yes.
Right. The time period during which an alleged victim of intimate abuse can actually report what has happened to them and can take criminal and civil action. So really what the Child Victims Act did was they said to themselves, and the policy behind this law was, many of the victims of these types of crimes are afraid, are ashamed, deal with all sorts of psychological things, and really aren't in a place to report what happened to them until they are much older. Mm-hmm. So taking that into consideration, the state of New York said, well, you know what? We will extend the age by which you can report these crimes. Now, I know you probably read some things about the pandemic, and I'm going to get to that in a second.
Okay.
But the main mindset behind this was actually what's going on with the Catholic Church. particularly in New York and in New Jersey, there were a lot of allegations against the Catholic Church that due to the previous statute of limitations, nothing could be done. And so the state was dealing with a lot of these victims saying, you know, this happened to me, and now because of your law, I can't do anything about it.
Mm-hmm.
So the state then said, okay, well, maybe we should take a look at our statute of limitations. And that is how the Child Victims Act came about. Now, they raised the age. It was initially, I believe, let me make sure I get this correct. It was initially 23. So initially, if someone wanted to file any type of suit or complaint about some type of abuse that they experienced as a child, and that's the biggest thing about the Child Victims Act. It is something that was experienced before a person became 18, as a child. Mm-hmm. So previously, if someone wanted to report something that happened to them before